Hi, good evening. I'm David Levine. I'm co-chair of Science Writers in New York. I'm here with Cheryl Pellerin, who is the author of Healing with Cannabis, which you should be able to see on your screen. Cheryl is a science writer with a Bachelor of Science degree in science journalism and nearly 30 years of experience writing about science in many forms. Her first book was Trips, How Hallucinogenics Work in Your Brain. She worked as a freelancer for the Discovery Channel and others, as well as a science writer for the state and defense departments. And she lives in Virginia, where she's joining us from her home. Cheryl, welcome. So you're going to make a presentation a little bit for our audience about the endocannabinoid system.
And endocannabinoid system. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, I can hear you fine now.
Okay.
Okay.
So here's the book cover, The Evolution of the Cannabinoid System and Why Cannabis Can Be Used to Treat So Many Conditions and Illnesses. We already had the introduction. So the endocannabinoid system is a critical biological system no one's ever heard of. Well, not many anyway.
You call it ECS, right? Okay, up there.
I do, yeah. So it is an ancient biological system. It started evolving 1 or 2 million years ago, and vertebrates have had, every vertebrate on Earth has had an endocannabinoid system for at least 600 million years. But it was only discovered in the late 90s. So it was 600 million years old, and finally, researchers started saying, hey, wait a minute. So its main role is homeostasis. So it doesn't have that much to do with cannabis, even though it's the only reason cannabis works in the body. And hardly anyone knows about it. They don't teach it in medical schools. At least they might be starting to, but right now they don't teach it in medical schools. So why did evolution conserve it across 1 billion years? It's not because it gets people high in cannabis, it's because the endocannabinoid system is a regulatory mechanism in the body's biochemistry and physiology, the machinery of everyday life. It's really a protective system, like the immune system is, only the immune system is protective against pathogens, and the endocannabinoid system is protective against inflammation, neurodegeneration, and stroke. And we'll talk about why later. Both are critical protective systems. More people know about the immune system than the endocannabinoid system. So endocannabinoids are like cannabinoids. They attach.
Okay, Cheryl, you froze.
Enzyme and receptors. Okay, so endocannabinoids mimic endocannabinoids, and the main endocannabinoids work at the same receptors as cannabinoids, and it explains why cannabis, why it helps cannabis work in people. And here they are. Oops, sorry. Sorry. The main endocannabinoids that we know about right now are the main receptors that we know about are CB1 and CB2. And there are the main cannabinoids are CBD, cannabidiol, and THC. In 1998, before anybody really knew about the endocannabinoid system and its protective effects on the body, a researcher named Vincenzo Di Marzo was doing research, and he realized that the messages that the endocannabinoid system was sending out were relax, eat, sleep, forget, and protect. The endocannabinoid system signaling helps you relax. It takes care of, it affects anxiety, reduces anxiety. Medical cannabis makes you hungry. It helps you sleep. And forget means that is why it's effective against PTSD. Forgetting is something that people with PTSD can't do. And that's why THC helps. And protect is the protective system that the protective effects that it has on the body. But it works. It doesn't work like every other system in the body. The neuronal doctrine of the nervous system for 100 years has been that neurotransmitters go from the presynaptic cell across the synaptic gap to the postsynaptic cell. The way endocannabinoids work in the body is in the cell, they're created by enzymes that put them together, but they're created in the postsynaptic cell, and they go backwards. After they're created by the enzymes, they go backwards to the presynaptic cell, and this is the way they're protective and the way they create homeostasis. They go backwards, and if there are molecules that are exciting the cell too much, they will reduce the excitation. So they act as sort of a modulator of neurotransmission. If it's too slow, they can speed it up. If it's too fast, they can slow it down. Retrograde signaling is what it's called. And it took me a long time to understand what researchers are trying to say about this backwards process. And the endocannabinoid system, and it's so all over the body, endocannabinoid, the cells can produce receptors for the endocannabinoids all over the body anytime the body needs it. So if someone has a stroke, then the cells create receptors for endocannabinoids, and the endocannabinoids come and help reduce the inflammation and the insult. So so here are some of the disorders that medical cannabis can help through the endocannabinoid system, can help treat. You can see for yourselves what they are: cancer, sleep problems, anxiety, digestive and bowel disorders, Parkinson's, Huntington's, and Alzheimer's, even diabetes and stroke and brain trauma, as we said. That's the book is about the endocannabinoid system. The first half of the book is about the endocannabinoid system. The second half of the book is I took several of the illnesses that endocannabinoids and cannabinoids can help treat, medical cannabis can help treat. And I listed a lot of I interviewed researchers who were all over the world, And I also listed the most recent research I could find on each of the illnesses. I've covered anxiety, I covered mental disorders, psychiatric disorders, I covered cancer, also the neurodegenerative diseases. And that's it.
Okay, so hi, how are you? I'm David Levine. If you have questions, please put them in the Q&A box, and we will talk to Cheryl and ask questions. We only have one so far. Don't put them in the chat box, because that's just for me and my SWINY co-chairs producing this, Joe Bonner and Cheryl, to talk if we have a problem. So I read the book. It's very complex science. It's very interesting. So a friend of mine just texted me from Paris and said, I got to go to sleep. It's 1:30 a.m. here. She said, but she said that medical cannabis is, she's German. And she said medical cannabis is legal in Germany as a treatment. Is it legal in any hospital in the United States as a treatment?
It may be legal, or
Okay.
medical cannabis. 35 states have approved medical cannabis programs, and people can go to dispensaries and buy medical cannabis. Usually, they have to get a doctor's letter. Doctors cannot prescribe medical cannabis because THC is still federally illegal in the United States, no matter how many states have approved it. And even CBD, which the 2018 Farm Bill took off the controlled substances list, where THC is still in Schedule 1. They took it off. They took CBD, a non-psychoactive, the major non-psychoactive cannabinoid in cannabis, but they put the FDA in charge of CBD products, and they put the USDA, the Agriculture Department, in charge of hemp growing. Hemp is defined as having less high CBD and less than 0.03% THC. So
why don't we define some terms? So
sure.
So why don't we define what THC is, one of the active ingredients? And
it's the psychoactive. It's the main psychoactive ingredient in cannabis.
Okay, so there are signs everywhere in every drugstore for CBD oil.
CBD is the major non-psychoactive cannabinoid in cannabis, and also in hemp.
Okay.
And it has its own medical effects, different than THC, but they work better together. Okay. Which is why when you
broke up a little bit.
Including for CBD, small amounts of THC.
Okay, so when you go to your pharmacy to buy CBD, how do you know okay, so it's not regulated by the government. It's not regulated by the FDA. How do you know
well, it is supposed to be, okay. But
how do you know what you're getting? How do you know if it's any good? How do you know if it's working? Except by
yeah, you can tell if it's working if you're using it. But I mean, that's one of the problems, that the FDA is supposed to oversee the products, to make have rules, like every other drug, have rules that the companies have to follow, and have information on the product that tells you where it came from and what it's made of and what's in it. But that's not really happening yet.
CBD is not a prescription, it's over the counter.
Yes, and if you ask someone at the FDA if it was over the counter, they would say, you know, it's not approved by the FDA, so it's really not legal.
Okay.
But
So what, and also explain what hemp is.
hemp is cannabis.
Okay.
Hemp is cannabis, but with a relatively high level of CBD and that low level of THC, 0.3% per, though I can't remember that. But anyway, it can't have more than 0.3% THC.
All right, now I guess let's talk about the drug laws. I mean, I was at a conference with Nina Volker was there, who's the head of the NIDA, and I asked her,
Yeah.
why is marijuana considered more dangerous than cocaine? It's Schedule 1.
Yeah, it's because that's a bad, because it's not.
But it is. It is, right?
But it's not.
And what is cocaine? What schedule is that?
I think it's Schedule 2. It's not even Schedule 1.
So basically they're saying that cocaine is less dangerous than marijuana.
That's right. They're saying it's less dangerous than THC.
Okay.
Which is completely wrong.
Right. So when did these, okay, so it's been used for thousands and thousands of years throughout the world. What happened in the 1940s that the drug laws changed?
Yeah, in 1939, I think. It was, for a few years, it was legal. Cannabis was legal. They had preparations and things that you could buy at the store. But then, and forgive me, I haven't, I have this in the book, but I haven't studied on it lately. But there, a law was passed that made cannabis illegal.
Right.
And it's been that way ever since 1937, I think the law was passed. And yes, it's been a safe medicine used for at least 5,000 years, safe and effective for 5,000 years, and it's illegal in the United States.
Okay. But okay, so I was in Denver. I went to a conference there and the governor spoke about it and the Secretary of Health. And they also had a pharmacist. I went to a store, and when you go in, they said, "Are you here for medical marijuana or are you here for recreational?" And they scan your driver's license because you can only do 2 transactions a day.
Oh, didn't know that.
Medical marijuana is taxed a lot less than recreational marijuana. But they don't, you might have a prescription to use it, but you show it to the person and they give you medication, but it's not like, you get 30 pills of penicillin or 60 pills of Zoloft or something like that.
You get a bag of pot.
Yeah, so it's the people are basically treating themselves based on what the reaction is. And Nina Volkel said, well, that's the reason it's Schedule 1. These states are doing a huge experiment.
They are. Nora Volkow.
Right.
It is an experiment. It's a big laboratory experiment with humans, with people, because as you said, cannabinoid science is incredibly complicated, complex. People are treating themselves sort of, but it's so safe that it's not like they've got heroin in their bag and they're just buying it across the counter. It's really safe. I mean, it can scare people, THC, if they take too much, but it'll come down. They'll come down from that if they want to, and they won't die.
Okay. So you know the story of Maureen Dowd, that she went to Denver, New York Times columnist, and she went to
Right,
Denver
I know.
and she bought some brownies, and she had one, and there was no effect. She had two, no. She took five, and she ended up,
Yeah,
you know,
in
in
the
a
emergency room.
narcotic state. So the pharmacist, you know, who was there, was the, part of the government, he was saying that he said there's a reason we prescribe 2 aspirins or 10 days of antibiotics, because we know how they work. People have uniform responses, but people have very different responses to marijuana. Some people get very high, some people get unhappy and start driving slowly. Other people can get paranoid. So when there's such a different reaction to, you know, the same medication, I guess my question is, how do we figure this out? How do we know who should be using it and who shouldn't be using it?
All the cannabis doctors, medical cannabis doctors I know, say start low and go slow.
Okay.
Now, if people are taking cannabis for pain, the best thing they can do is vape, because when you vape cannabis, it goes right in. You can feel it immediately within 5 minutes, and if you're having pain, that's what you want. If you take pills that have CBD and THC in them, it has to go through, you know, it has first pass through the dietary system, and it takes a while for you to feel it. And of course, it reduces even if you were taking a pill with 500 milligrams of THC or something, well, CBD, let's say, you wouldn't get that much. You get 30% or so of that. And that's why you can't prescribe it. People who go in with papers, they have doctor's recommendations. I just wanted to say, if you buy CBD, and you can buy it online, you know, the FDA is probably just tearing out their hair because anyone can buy it anytime. Without FDA approval. But it's good to buy CBD that's made, this is my opinion, it's good to buy CBD that's made in a legal cannabis state, because you want to take CBD that has a little bit of THC in it. It works better. It's called an entourage effect, that all the cannabinoids work better if they're from whole plant. So you get more cannabinoids, you get more terpenes, you get more flavonoids, all the things that help medical cannabis work the best it can for illnesses. So I just wanted to mention that.
So if you live in one of the 15 states where it's illegal, can you import CBD? Can you order it online and have them mailed to you, or you can't?
Absolutely.
Okay.
I've been doing it since 2014, and I live in Virginia, and I just got my first medical cannabis card. We don't even have dispensaries yet, but you can get a doctor's recommendation if you have the right illnesses.
It's a big tobacco state too.
Yeah.
So, all right, so I have questions from the audience. There are a lot of good questions, which is nice.
Okay.
So, well, here's a general question: who's the intended audience for the book?
That's a good question. You know, I wanted to make it as understandable as I could for regular people. I know some people find it more technical, but I did my best to use regular language, except when I warn them when long words are coming up, and there's humor in the text, and a lot of pictures, 170 color pictures in the book, because I wanted to, some of them from the slides I just showed, I wanted people, it's easier to understand if you can see what they're saying. I also interviewed the researchers because they made the book, as far as I'm concerned. They explain their work. They explain it in language that's easy to understand. They tell how things work. And so combined, yeah, the cannabinoid science is difficult. There are long words in there, but I'm hoping that if someone's really interested in medical cannabis, they will, pay attention to the things they can understand and come back later and read the other stuff if they want. It's been called, there's a really good review on Amazon that says that could be useful in the classroom, the book.
Well,
And
it also lists all the clinical trials going on.
say again?
You also list all the clinical trials that are.
Yeah, not all of them, but the ones I could find that are most useful for people to understand. And I thought that was really important to have the clinic. There's so many clinical trials using cannabis and all kinds of other cannabinoid substances that people are putting together. Many all the time. Sorry.
Is there any evidence that CBD or medical cannabis can be helpful with the cognitive deficits that are common when anesthesia is used after age 70? The deficits reflect damage to mitochondria in the brain.
Yes, there's research on that. The neurodegenerative diseases that cannabis can help, even CBD by itself can help how the brain removes its damaged cells and things like that, and it's anti-inflammatory, super anti-inflammatory, and NIDA knew that in the 1980s. So, but like super anti-inflammatory, and inflammation underlies many of the diseases that people have. So yes, I think it would be helpful. I'm not a doctor. I take a course every in medical cannabis, but I'm not a doctor. I just know what the research says.
Well, I know now that they argue that Lipitor and statins are, that they also work through anti-inflammation, that statins work through anti-inflammation, and also that metformin is being studied for the same thing against other diseases, as like cancer and everything else. So here's a question. What role do you believe clinical psychologists who are not MDs should have in recommending the use of cannabis?
They should read some of the books that cannabis doctors are starting to write and put out, because they're telling how they use cannabis or CBD, and how their patients fare on cannabis, medical cannabis. And until they start teaching this cannabinoid medicine and the endocannabinoid system in medical schools, that's really the only place they can go for that. And there are like schools, educational programs for anyone who wants to learn about the endocannabinoid system and medical cannabis.
Okay. In some
They
cases,
cost money. Sorry, they cost money.
everything does. In some cases, depression results in too high a rate of the uptake of serotonin. But if ECS works on the presynaptic neurons that produce serotonin, wouldn't that aggravate depression in these individuals?
The endocannabinoid system, the endocannabinoids work through a lot of different neurotransmitter systems, including serotonin, including dopamine. Um, uh, and no, they don't. They don't make people depressed. They help people who are depressed in a lot of ways. CBD itself is, there's research on CBD and schizophrenia, how it's very helpful to certain people who have schizophrenia.
Basic question, how does one determine what dose to take?
Yeah, that's why it's very important, that it's very useful to remember what the doctors tell each other, and tell their patients, is to start with the lowest dose, the lowest working dose, and try that for a few weeks. If you're not feeling effects, then raise it a little bit, try that for another few weeks. And it works differently in people anyway. Everybody is different, unlike what the drug companies think. But if people take the lowest dose that works and then go up slowly, if necessary, some people can have medical effects with very low doses of cannabis and CBD. So start low, go slow.
Okay.
Excuse me.
So there was a 60 Minutes where they went to Israel and they showed people with Parkinson's, and they said they were very interesting. They said they like to actually smoke a joint because that's how they titrate the dose. So here's my question: is there a role for cannabis in treating Parkinson's disease, which you say in the book there is?
Yeah.
How could it help, and what's the mechanism of action?
The mechanism of action, let me just tell you that Israel started allowing medical cannabis in their country in 2007, a decade before anybody was really doing that, almost. So you can titrate it because it works fast. So you don't take one, nothing happens, and you take another one. If you sniff or smoke, sniffing is healthier than smoking for your lungs and throat and stuff, although it's not dangerous like cigarettes. You can titrate it that way. A vaporizer is even better because it doesn't get hot as smoke.
Talk about vaping.
Vaping is go ahead.
Cigarettes were thought to be really, really safe, and now we found they're not so safe. That some teenagers are getting problems with their lungs. It's burning their lungs and all kinds of things. And how do we know this is not going to happen? I mean, with widespread vaping, how do we know this is not going to happen with anything?
There's a lot of research going on. Nora Volkow and the whole group at NIDA, all the research they do is about the harm that cannabis can cause. That's all they fund. Research that tells you how bad cannabis is, and cannabis abuse and overdosing and things like that.
If a drug isn't safe, then it doesn't really matter how effective it is, I guess, right? I mean, isn't that like, if you're looking at vaccine trials right now, if the vaccine isn't safe to take, you can't take it.
Well, that's ridiculous. I mean, look at all the medications approved by the FDA, where people are dying and suing and getting cancer and every other thing.
Okay.
So, and cannabis has a 5,000-year history of safety and efficacy.
Okay. So I had no idea this was real. Can you touch on the pros and cons of cannabis for pets?
I didn't have that in the book, but there is research on giving cannabis to pets. And remember, every vertebrate on Earth has an endocannabinoid system. So every vertebrate on Earth is sensitive to cannabis, including dogs, cats, squirrels, Everyone, anything that has a vertebrae, vertebrae. So I think there's not so much research on animals as people, but a lot of people try it on their pets, and it works sometimes, and
Okay.
it's safe.
Okay. So someone's wrote, can you refer us to a good history resource of how marijuana became a controlled substance? I saw a video, and I don't remember what it is, that explained that the people who were in charge of enforcing prohibition had nothing to do with it ended, so they chose to restrict marijuana instead.
No, they restricted cannabis earlier, I think. I'm not familiar. I mean, I don't know the dates that everything started, but I think that cannabis was made illegal around, either around the same time or just before. I could be wrong,
Okay.
but that's probably it's probably not true.
Okay. Yeah, I don't think
My opinion.
I don't think there was an Elliot Ness hunting down illegal marijuana. Well, the movie Reefer Madness really did some, if anyone hasn't seen Reefer Madness, you should definitely see this movie.
It's ridiculous. Don't see it.
Well, yeah, you might understand why it's not legal here.
No, there's nothing in Reefer Madness that you should see or believe or take away or anything.
When I saw it, everybody was,
My opinion.
I saw everybody was just laughing and giggling. So, is there a valid diagnosis, cannabis-induced psychosis?
I'd say no. Cannabis doesn't give people psychosis. And you can, I am only saying this because I've read the research and it's in the book about psychosis. Cannabis treats psychosis.
Okay. When I was in college, I saw people who smoked marijuana and had anxiety attacks and ended up in the emergency rooms. I don't think it was, I'm not quite sure why, but it was like their first anxiety attack. They never had one before, and probably because they took too much.
Yeah, THC, they can take too much. And as you said, everyone's different. And if someone took like Maureen Dowd, she didn't know how much she was taking, and then she got too high. So it can happen, THC, but it won't kill you.
No.
Like heroin and opioids and things like that. And it will help pain.
I've heard over and over again that the marijuana that I was offered in college in the 1970s, that it's much stronger than it is today. Is that true?
Maybe, maybe not in medical cannabis though.
Okay.
I mean, medical cannabis is not just grown and thrown into bags, and you don't get street cannabis in medical cannabis products. But it might be a little higher. I have a quote from a horticulturist in the book that talks about that. And he says maybe it's a little stronger.
All right, so let's get back to medical cannabis. So I was in Switzerland, and I saw a child having a seizure. They dropped some kinds of marijuana or some pellets, whatever they were, was in them, and the seizure stopped. So it's been proven, and that was one of the big fears of Colorado, in proving that they thought that every mother who had an epileptic child was going to move to Colorado, which did not happen. But
a lot of them did.
Yeah, but not everyone.
Not everyone. No, that's right.
So, what has medical cannabis been shown to be the most effective for? I know, like, most of us know about its anti-nausea process.
For cancer.
Chemotherapy. So what are the most valid ones that it's been proved in studies, and what are some of the ones that are, just they're looking at?
I just wanted to mention, epilepsy. Cannabis works on epilepsy because of the retrograde signaling that goes back to cells that are too excited, and that's what happens in epilepsy. These cells, they're molecules, excited molecules, like oh God, I can't think of the word. Anyway, and the endocannabinoids go back and tone down the excitation. And so that's how cannabis works for epilepsy. It tones down. Now, one of the things that you should know is that a lot of these researchers say that some of them believe that there's a deficiency in your endocannabinoid system. Its main thing is to balance, is homeostasis in the body. So if people have an unbalanced, an unbalanced endocannabinoid system, if they're missing some of the cannabinoids can help. If they're missing some of the endocannabinoids, taking cannabinoids can help balance the endocannabinoid system. An unbalanced endocannabinoid system, some researchers say, is the basis of lots of diseases. So some researchers say that you should take not just medical cannabis for diseases, but as a supplement to make sure that you keep your endocannabinoid system working correctly. Tell me the second question you asked.
So what?
Oh, what's the best?
What are the, so if there are top 5 diseases that, the research has shown it works for, and what are the diseases being researched? Also, the third question I have is that, so the United States is not leading the world in research in cannabis, obviously.
Israel is.
Israel is, and what other countries?
I've been talking to a lot of researchers in Spain.
Okay.
There are a lot of researchers there, but definitely Israel is way above everyone, all the other countries. But here's the thing, all these researchers work with international teams.
Right.
Israel researchers don't just work by themselves in their labs. They get together with international teams and work that way. And I think a lot of the research going on right now is multinational. The other thing is, let's see, what was the other question? I'm getting them mixed up. Oh, the thing that's best, I think, about medical cannabis is that it helps that it's anti-inflammatory. Inflammation is one of the upsets in the body that creates problems in so many illnesses. I'd say if I had to choose one that I heard about and read about writing the book, it would be that it's a super anti-inflammatory agent.
So, so I read about Alzheimer's disease, and so I was very intrigued by your chapter that it's being used.
Well, it's not being used on too many people.
Right.
It's
research.
Hard to say again.
Research.
Yeah, research in the lab, in animals. That research is happening, but there is some small numbers of people that have tried cannabis for the neurodegeneration in their brains. That's inflammation. and inflammation, and it slows down the brain's mechanism for cleaning up the area in the brain, taking out dead cells and making sure everything runs well. But the brain gets sort of, and this is, I'm just saying, the brain gets sort of clogged up with TAW and fibrillary problems in the brain, and cannabis can help that.
Okay, so here's a question. Do you have any recommendation as to whether it is beneficial to a cannabis user to grow his or her own marijuana?
Lots of doctors like it, that people do. One doctor who teaches a healer course that I take thinks it's beneficial for a person to be able to grow their own, that it relaxes them, that it gives them control over their illness. And he likes it that people do that. I mean, not everyone can do it. Not everyone knows how to do it, but the one doctor I've talked to about it, he thought it was a good idea.
Well, even the states that, like in Colorado, there are laws as to how many plants you can actually grow. And
I don't know, probably.
there are. Here's another question. I'm hoping to hear about any sex differences in these clinical studies, given the sex differences documented for pain and many other chronic illnesses.
Yeah, the research is at a really early stage right now. And so I did remember hearing some sex differences in some of the research in the book, but I'm not sure that there's a lot of specific sex differentiation and clinical trials right now. I could be wrong. Clinical trials, researchers are going really fast in researching cannabis and its effects, but I can't answer the question.
Okay.
Sorry.
Here's a question: does cannabis affect judgment and/or reflexes? And I guess it depends on how much.
And if it's high THC, probably. Although driving, people have there's some, and believe me, the researchers who are getting funded to show that cannabis is bad, they're trying to show that it's dangerous for people to drive while they're stoned. But medical cannabis, and maybe that's true for some people. I don't know that they've really been able to prove that with research. And certainly a non-psychoactive cannabinoid like CBD doesn't matter if you drive or not with it. You're not, it's not psychoactive. You don't feel the kind of disorientation that you do with THC.
So why do you think the federal government, especially NIDA, is so upset about? Why are they so anti-marijuana? This has been going on for a long time.
It has. I don't know. They don't take the time to learn. This is just my opinion, and they're not paying attention to the medical cannabis research and the number of people who are using cannabis for their good, to help themselves. Football players, older people, people with Parkinson's and Huntington's and Alzheimer's and dementia could help themselves and have a better quality of life. Anyway, the DEA is not interested in the benefits of medical cannabis. Okay. If they were, they would do something different.
Okay. So why don't you give us some closing remarks, and then we'll, okay, first of all, I want to, usually I do these talks in person. Since the COVID era, we haven't. So, and we would sell books and the author would sign them and get to know you. So, here's the book.
Oh, yeah, there it is.
I know it's on Amazon, but how else can you get it? Because we want to.
You can get it at bookstores. I've seen it in bookstores. Little tiny independent bookstores can have it. Some of them only have it online if they're small bookstores, but you can order it from your favorite bookstore online. You don't have to go to Amazon to get it. But you can, I'm not sure how many, like I went to Barnes and Noble and you can get it there, but you have to order it online from them. They're not having it, they're not carrying it in the store near where I live because they've cut down the number of books they have in the store. But anyway, you can get it at a lot of different bookstores. If you have an independent bookstore you like, you can get it there online at least.
So what's it like being an author publishing a book in the COVID era?
It was great staying home and writing, but the book was mostly done by the time was done by the time COVID arrived. I'm sorry I can't go to book signings because that would be fun. But after there's a vaccine, I'll probably do some belated book signings. Everyone is welcome. I'll go to like Florida, where I went to high school, and do a book signing there. They always like my books, trips about hallucinogens and things like that.
So I'm not going to leave without you talking about Robert Crum, because you told me you know him.
When I
Tell people who he is.
Well, Robert Crum is the creator of Zap Comics back in the 60s. And he and a bunch of other underground artists, wonderful artists, underground artists, put out Zap Comics for, I don't know how long, years. And they're really funny and really rude and, you know, have a lot of sex in them and things like that. But when I realized that I was gonna write a book about hallucinogens, they call them psychedelics now, about psychedelics, I realized that Crum would be the best guy to do the cover because, you know, because it was in San Francisco and it was all during the 1967, you know, everyone getting high on everything in San Francisco. And so I found him in the south of France, that's where he lives now, and wrote him a letter asking if he would do the cover for my book. And I explained why I was doing it and to help people really who weren't getting the straight dope on psychedelics at the time. Just Say No was going on, and that was stupid, a stupid way to get people to anyway, don't get me started. So he was very nice and he wrote back and he said he didn't have time to do the cover, but that I could use any of his old work in the book.
Well, he did do a very famous cover for Janis Joplin's album.
Yeah, he did. That was beautiful. And Trips, you can still buy Trips. It was published in 1998. It has wonderful cartoons and a great history of LSD and the other classical hallucinogens. But the research is old. There's so much research now on medical psychedelics, psychedelic medicine. And it's amazing what kinds of, like PTSD, like all kinds of anxiety disorders, mental disorders. But you know, And so I think it's really interesting. The book doesn't go into that because it wasn't written then, but I mean, because it wasn't being done then. But you can get history and cartoons if you want, if you're interested.
Do you foresee a time when there will be research done in, when it will be legal in every state? And
Yeah, I do. It's too valuable a medicine. It's a medicine that has all kinds of effects just by itself. And the FDA approved medicines treat one thing. But cannabis is what they call pleiotropic. It does a lot of different things all at once.
now there is an FDA approved cannabis, right?
Yes, yes, it's Epidiolex by GW Pharmaceuticals in the UK. And Sativex is another of their products that's legal all over Europe. And I think they're working on clinical trials here. Sativex is a 1-to-1 CBD THC oil. And Epidiolex is a CBD drug, basically. That's the first drug to come from the whole plant, but mostly CBD.
And what's it approved for use for?
It's approved for childhood epilepsy.
Okay.
And I think that it's being used in clinical trials because it's CBD, and clinical trials can legally use it to see if it works on any other kinds of things, which it will.
Maybe because everyone wants to help children, so maybe children will be the way that we get approval in all the states for everything.
Maybe, and it's such a good medicine, so safe.
I mean, I used to work with the American Cancer Society. When the HPV vaccine came out, we were expecting a lot of opposition from the Christian right, because they said it was going to cause promiscuity. And we kind of tried to position it as it's the first vaccine that worked against cancer, and nobody went against that. And when you have a drug for that and I've actually seen it, when you have a drug that can help children with epilepsy, no one can oppose that.
That's right.
That's going to be the gateway, which is not a good term, I know, with drugs, but I think that will be the way everything's going to be approved. And I hope so. It happens. So anyway, thank you very much for spending an hour with us. There are a few questions I couldn't get to. Anyway,
thanks for having me.
And a week from Friday at 2 p.m., we're going to have Dr. Paul Offit back, who will, he's at the Children's Hospital of Philadelphia. He's on CNN and MSNBC almost every day. And he said he's willing to answer any of your questions, like, can you take an elevator? Can you go to the gym? Can you,
wow,
6 months past COVID, can you
important.
So we're just going to go back to COVID-19. So this was a nice break. And thank you so much, and great luck in your book. It was just published. So
yeah, August 4th. Now, if anyone has questions they want to ask me, they can go to my my Facebook book page, Cheryl Pellerin Books, and ask questions there.
Okay, so please go ahead. And again, thank you.
Thanks so much.
I want to thank Joe Bonner for helping to get your PowerPoints up there. And
yeah, me too. Thanks, Joe.
And we appreciate it, and being in the background. And thank you again for spending this time with us.
Thank you. It was really fun.
Okay, great. Thanks.